I didn't expect Christmas dinner to end with me lying on the floor. One second I was pulling out a chair, and the next my stepdad's hand was on my shoulder, shoving hard enough to knock the breath out of me. He glared down and said, "That seat belongs to my real daughter. Get out!" The room froze. No one moved. No one spoke. I stood up slowly, tasting metal, feeling the heat rise in my chest. What he didn't know was that before the night was over, I'd make sure this moment changed his life forever. I wish I could tell you that moment at the Christmas table came out of nowhere. That my stepdad snapped for the first time, and everyone was just as shocked as I was. But the truth is, families don't break in a single night. They crack in small, quiet ways long before anyone hears the sound. I've lived with him since I was 13. My mom married him after a whirlwind year of dating, calling it her chance at a fresh start. For her, it probably was. For me, it meant learning to shrink myself in the very house that was supposed to feel safe. He never yelled, never cursed. He didn't need to. His silence was sharp enough. A raised eyebrow here, a tight smirk there, a comment about real family dropped exactly when he knew it would land. Mom always brushed it off. "He's trying his best. You're too sensitive. You read too much into things." I heard those lines so many times they became background noise, like the hum of the old heater in my childhood bedroom. By the time I reached my 20s, I'd perfected the art of taking up as little space as possible. Holidays were the worst. An entire house decorated like a magazine spread, but every room felt colder than the winter outside. His daughter Emily had the spotlight. She didn't do anything wrong. She just existed in the light he made for her. And I didn't. Still, I kept coming back. Not for him, but for my mom. Because some part of me believed that if I tried hard enough, if I stayed long enough, maybe she'd finally see me instead of the version he painted. This Christmas was supposed to be simple. Dinner, gifts, forced smiles. I even rehearsed polite answers in the car on the drive over just to avoid giving him anything he could twist into attitude. But the tension hit the second I walked through the door. He barely looked at me. My mom handed me a plate without meeting my eyes. Emily was already sitting at the end of the table, the seat I had taken every year since middle school. I should have recognized the setup. When he pushed me, it didn't just knock me down physically. It knocked down the last illusion I'd been clinging to, that staying quiet would protect me. As I straightened myself, brushing pine needles off my sweater, one thought settled in like ice. Enough. The room went silent after he pushed me. But the silence wasn't protective. It was the kind people use when they're waiting to see how much humiliation you'll swallow before you make things uncomfortable for them. My mom gasped, but not in the way a mother gasps when her child is hurt. It was the sharp inhale of someone embarrassed that the moment wasn't staying neatly under the rug where she preferred it. She reached for a napkin like she could erase what just happened with a swipe of linen. "Ava, sweetie, just sit somewhere else," she whispered, eyes darting between me and him like I was the one who started this. Emily stared at her plate, pretending to adjust her bracelet. She wasn't cruel, just too used to being the girl worth defending. I pulled myself up, palms stinging from hitting the hardwood. My stepdad didn't even flinch. He stood over me, shoulders squared, hands still gripping the back of the chair he'd ripped from me, his voice cutting through the tension. I said what I said, he repeated. "This seat belongs to my real daughter." Real. That word burned more than the fall. I straightened my sweater, forcing my voice to stay level. "You could have just asked me to move." He smirked a small, satisfied curl of the lips. "You never listen unless someone makes it clear." There it was, the truth. He never bothered to hide. He didn't want me corrected. He wanted me humiliated. My mom rushed in with a shaky laugh. "Let's not ruin Christmas, Ava. There's a chair by the window." The chair by the window. Far from the table. Far from the conversation. Far from being part of this family. I felt my pulse thewing in my ears. For years, I convinced myself that enduring moments like this was easier than confronting them. That keeping the peace meant keeping the family together. But staring at the table at him, at my mom, at the quiet complicity of every person there, I felt something shift, not rage, not even hurt, just clarity. I walked to the kitchen instead of the window seat. My hands were trembling as I reached for my coat. My mom followed after me, whispering, "Don't make a scene." I turned to her, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. "He pushed me in front of you, and you're worried about a scene." She blinked, stunned into speechlessness. Behind her, I could still hear him laughing quietly with Emily like nothing had happened, like I was nothing. That was the moment, the exact second I felt the break. A clean snap inside me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You will regret this." Soft enough that only my mom heard. I wasn't threatening him. I was finally choosing myself. I drove home that night with both hands clenched on the steering wheel, the Christmas lights blurring through my windshield like smeared watercolor. I wasn't crying. I thought I would, but there was nothing left to spill. Just a steady, focused quiet, like my mind had finally stopped negotiating with pain it had learned to tolerate. My phone buzzed once, then again, then nonstop. Mom. Mom again. Then Emily, then Mom. I didn't answer. Let them sit in the silence they'd insisted I accept all these years. When I got home, the house was dim, except for the glow above my kitchen sink. I hung my coat and stood there for a long moment, fingers pressed against the counter, replaying the shove in my head, the shock of the floor meeting my palms, my mother's whisper, "Don't make a scene." His voice echoing behind her like an iron gate slamming shut. "Real daughter." The words clung to me like frost. I boiled water for tea, just to have something warm in my hands. The steam rose soft and ghost-like, while a different kind of resolve settled in my chest. He wanted to remind me of my place. He wanted to shrink me down, so small I'd disappear from the frame of their perfect holiday picture. Fine. I would disappear, but not in the way he expected. I opened my laptop, not to rant, not to send a furious message. I pulled up old documents, payments, bills, agreements. Every piece of paper my mom had ever asked me to help organize over the years. He always liked to pretend he was the head of the household, but half the responsibilities that held that house together had my fingerprints on them. I just never pointed it out. I wasn't looking to destroy him. That wasn't my goal. I wanted something far more precise, accountability. I reviewed everything with a detached calm I'd never felt before. The heating repairs he put in my mother's name, but never paid. The credit cards he used that she covered without complaint. The house maintenance he neglected, even though he insisted he handled everything. Patterns reveal themselves when you finally stop apologizing for noticing them. By the time the clock hit midnight, I had outlined exactly what I needed to bring forward. Not to punish him, but to protect the person who kept choosing him over me without understanding what she was risking. I closed the laptop and exhaled slowly. Tomorrow morning, his world would tilt, not because I broke anything, but because I finally held a mirror to the things he'd spent years stepping over and he wouldn't see it coming. He woke up at sunrise. I know because the first call came at 6:12 a.m. I didn't answer. I was standing at my kitchen counter, pouring cereal into a bowl, the morning light brushing across the tile floor like nothing extraordinary was happening. My phone kept buzzing against the wood. His name, then Mom's, then his again. By the time I sat down, there were 9 missed calls. By the time I finished breakfast, there were 17. By the time I tied my shoes to leave home, the number had grown to 26. I didn't check a single voicemail. Instead, I drove to a small office in the north end of the city, a place I'd visited only once before years ago when I helped my mom sort out a minor issue with her insurance. The attorney there remembered me instantly. He had kind eyes and a voice like gravel softened with time. "What brings you in today, Ava?" I slid a folder onto his desk. "I need help making sure my mom understands what she's financially tied to and what she isn't." He opened the folder, flipping through the documents I had organized overnight. Statements she had covered repairs, she had paid for maintenance. He had ignored while insisting everything was his responsibility. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just a long, steady trail of a woman carrying weight. A man pretended he lifted. The attorney exhaled slowly. "This is a lot. Does your mother know any of this?" "No," I said, because he never let her see the full picture, and she never asked. He nodded, thoughtful. "And what do you want to do?" "I want her to know the truth. I want her to understand what she's been protecting at my expense." He tapped his pen twice against the folder. "We can request a meeting. Neutral ground. Lay out the information calmly. Nothing confrontational." Confrontation already happened last night. I said quietly, This is clarity." He nodded again. "You're not trying to destroy him." "No," I said, "just the version of him she thinks she knows." We scheduled the meeting for that afternoon. When I walked out of the office, The cold air hit my face like a baptism. My phone vibrated again, this time with a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring out. When the voicemail icon popped up, I pressed play. It was my mom. "Ava, please call me. He's upset," he said. "You're trying to cause trouble. I don't know what happened last night, but we need to talk." I deleted it, not out of anger, out of exhaustion. She still didn't understand that what happened last night wasn't a beginning. It was a culmination. By noon, the missed calls had climbed to 33. I spent the rest of the morning at a small cafe across from the attorney's office, warming my hands around a cup of coffee, watching frost melt down the windows. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for the next wound. I was preparing for truth. At 2 o'clock, my mom arrived at the attorney's office alone. She looked tired, her scarf slightly crooked, her eyes rimmed with red, like she'd been crying for hours. She walked toward me cautiously, like I might disappear if she approached too fast. "Ava," she whispered, "why are we here?" I gestured to the conference room. "You'll understand in a moment." When the attorney spread the documents out across the polished table, she stared at them with the kind of confusion that slowly turns into fear. Her fingers trembled as she traced dates and amounts she had completely forgotten about. "Why? Why did he put this in my name?" she asked. The attorney answered gently. "Legally, he couldn't qualify. Your credit carried these obligations. You've been responsible for most of the household expenses." She blinked rapidly, but he told me he handled everything. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The attorney continued. "Nothing here is illegal, but it does show a long pattern of financial dependence that has left you vulnerable without realizing it." Mom leaned back, hand covering her mouth. I had no idea. That was the moment right there when the narrative she'd clung to all these years finally cracked. I saw it in her eyes. The loyalty she had defended, the tone she used to silence me, the excuses she recited on autopilot, all of it collided with the reality sitting right in front of her. And then her phone buzzed on the table. She flinched, turning its screen up. 37 missed calls, all from him. She didn't answer. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. Finally, she looked at me last night. "When he pushed you, Ava, I am so sorry. I didn't think it was that serious. I thought you two just argued." I shook my head. "He shoved me to the floor, Mom, in front of everyone. And you told me not to make a scene." She winced like the words themselves were knives. "I didn't know what to do," she whispered. "He gets angry when I confront him. I thought keeping things calm was better." Calm for who? My voice didn't rise, but it cut through the room like glass. Her eyes filled. "I never wanted you to feel unwanted. But I did, I said, for years. And yesterday wasn't the first time. It was just the first time. It was undeniable." The attorney excused himself to give us privacy. When the door clicked shut, Mom folded her arms over herself like she was trying to keep from breaking apart. "What happens now?" she whispered. "That's up to you," I said. "But whatever you decide, it has to be with full knowledge, not the story he tells you." Another buzz. Her phone lit up. 41 missed calls. She silenced it without answering. When we walked out of the office together, the winter sun was already sinking, casting a long shadow behind us on the sidewalk. I expected her to leave to return to him like she always did, held in place by habit and fear. But she didn't. She stood beside me, breathing into her scarf, staring at her shoes like she was gathering pieces of herself she hadn't touched in years. Then she said quietly, "Ava, I want to go home." Not to him, to my sisters, just for tonight. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't revenge. It was the beginning of accountability. As we turned toward the parking lot, my phone buzzed once more. I looked down. 47 missed calls. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just felt relief. He finally knew I wasn't playing by his script anymore. And tomorrow he would have to live in a world where I no longer collapsed under his voice, his expectations, his version of family. A world where the truth had a seat at the table, even if he tried to push it away. My mom stayed with her sister for several days. I didn't check on her constantly, didn't hover, or try to direct her choices. For once, she wasn't leaning on him or expecting me to smooth things over. She was simply sitting with the truth. And that was more than anything I'd seen her do in years. Meanwhile, the calls from him slowed, then stopped. No apologies, No explanations, just silence thick enough to confirm everything we had uncovered. He wasn't looking for understanding. He was looking for control. And without an audience, he had nothing to say. Mom asked me to meet her for coffee later that week. When she walked in, she looked smaller but steadier, like someone who'd finally stepped out of a long, cold shadow. "I read everything again," she said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "I can't believe how blind I was." "You weren't blind," I told her. "You were tired, and he counted on that." She nodded slowly. "I want things to be different. I want to learn how to stand up for myself and for you." It wasn't a perfect apology. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was honest, and that mattered more than anything she could have said at the Christmas table. As she talked about next steps, practical ones, gentle ones, I felt a strange lightness bloom in my chest. Not victory, not even closure, just the quiet relief of finally seeing my mother choose herself. And if she could do that, then maybe finally she could choose me too. I didn't walk away from that Christmas to punish anyone. I walked away because I finally understood that protecting myself wasn't disloyal. It was necessary. Families don't heal through silence or endurance. They heal when someone is brave enough to break the pattern. For us, it started with one truth laid on a table where I was never allowed to sit. If this story reminds you of something you've lived through, share it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.